From the basement of La Penta, this is WICR.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Sports Vault. I am your host with the most, Jersey Joe Archino. And if you had to find a way to try to describe the NBA playoffs to this point, I think it'd have to be one-sided. I mean, when you look at the 5 series so far that have played 2 games, 5 of those teams have taken a 2-0 lead. Now, obviously tonight that's probably going to change. I think we have Spurs, Clippers tonight. We have Grizzlies, Blazers, one more. So, I mean, you really think out of those ones, those are going to be a little bit more two-sided in that regard. But I think for the most part, these series have been very one-sided. Now, in the games themselves, there have been a lot of shifts, but you really see down the stretch, the better teams are winning these games. The teams that are more composed, the teams that move the ball better, the teams that lock down defense and make the plays, and at the end of the day, have the best players, because at the end of the day, the best players are the ones who you put the ball in their hands in the last 8 minutes of a game, you tell them to go and make plays, and they do. And certainly in the first game last night with Cleveland and Boston, that was the case. Now, Boston doesn't make anything easy. I mean, I think you give Brad Stevens so much credit. He's done he makes this team with his presence and his coaching so much better than they actually are. Now, they've got some nice players. Isaiah Thomas, Marcus Smart has shown glimpses here and there. Olynyk is okay. Jared Sullinger is a nice player. But for the most part, to do what they do, given the talent, I think it all has to come down to coaching, and they know how they want to play. They play smart. They do everything very well. They play defense very well. But at the end of the day, the talent just isn't there to really equate to all of that. In Cleveland, it was a close game. They had to work for a lot of things until they really got into that fourth quarter where they really started to open it up and just everything clicked. LeBron, obviously the best player in the world, doing what he does in the fourth quarter. 15 of his 30 points in the fourth quarter. He was just unstoppable. And I think that's the biggest thing where you've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, the change in LeBron is knowing when he has to turn on his scoring and when he has to get his teammates more involved. I mean, he's at the point now where he knows exactly what he has to do and when he has to do it. He knows the flow of the game. He knows when he has to become a scorer and when to facilitate more. And I think last night in the fourth quarter is just a perfect example of that. He kind of knew that he had to kind of bring it home. It was kind of close to that point, and then he had to turn his scoring on, and he did, and he was just fantastic. You can't stop LeBron when he goes and he attacks the basket. You really can't. There's nothing you can do to stop him. He's going to get fouled. He's going to get his free throws. He's going to just humiliate you, and that's just what he's done. He's made it out of his career. And another strong game from Kyrie Irving. Now, that's the guy who I've hung my hat on all years. Kyrie Irving, his development, how good he is, how he really, truly affects the game in every play. I mean, on the defensive side, on the offensive side, Kyrie is just phenomenal. Watching him is incredible. And him and LeBron, I read a nice article yesterday. The two of them, like Kyrie said it best, we've got each other's backs. We don't always see eye to eye time to time, but we've always got each other's backs. And I think that's a great way to put it. The two of them understand that they're the lead dogs for this team. They set the tone defensively and offensively, facilitating the offense. And that's really the thing you've got to like about them, is how unselfish they are. And that's what breeds championship basketball, is when you have unselfish stars, and especially when you have two dynamic ones who can go off offensively like no one else. When they have that unselfish nature about them, giving people their shots, giving people more looks, that just breeds success. And that's a reason why LeBron's been in the finals 4 times in a row. The most giving superstar in the NBA. But last night, it was another good Cavaliers win. They're up 2-0 in the series. I don't think much surprises. Again, like we said, Boston plays hard. They do things the right way, but at the end of the day, the talent differential between the two teams is just too immense. The next series, though, with the Washington and Toronto, a little interesting. Now, I picked Washington, as did my co-host Big Shot Robin Armand Medeo, but I thought that we'd be tied up 1 apiece at this point, especially with the Raptors being the home team here. But I mean, Washington, and it's interesting too, because John Wall and Bradley Beal, as they even said in their press conferences last night, didn't really have very strong first games, but in this second game, I mean, the two of them, look, kind of like Kyrie and LeBron for Cleveland. They're that for Washington. They're the guys who set the tone. They, especially from a facilitating standpoint and from a scoring standpoint. I mean, they really have a big responsibility for this team, and they certainly showed it last night. I mean, John Wall last night was incredible. 17 assists, 26 points. I mean, and that's the thing I really like about John Wall is just, again, I like good superstars who are unselfish, and especially for John Wall, where sometimes that was a little bit of the knock on him earlier in his career. This year, I think he led the NBA in assists. Again, in this game, he had 17 of them, 26 points to go along with it, doing everything it takes to win for his team. The guy, I mean, I think he gets it, and you give a lot of credit to all these young point guards in the league, Mike Conley, Damian Lillard, John Wall, because a lot of them came into the NBA and needed a lot of work. And they certainly done the work. They put in a lot of work, especially a guy like Mike Conley, who might not have the same athleticism as the other two, Lillard and Wall. But I mean, he's certainly improved his game in every aspect every year. He gets better every single season. You're seeing it now with Memphis and how good they've been this year. But I think John Wall last night was terrific. Again, I'm a little surprised that it's 2-0, but at the same time, I'm really not, because Toronto, for me, this year never really convinced me. I never really saw a stretch from them where I really, truly believed that they could really do a lot of big things. Now, they have a nice team. I think Kyle Lowry had a great year this year. They did have some injuries, but I think for the most part, Toronto just never really gave me anything to really cling to, and I think you're seeing it right now. Now, Washington's up 2-0 and they're going home. I honestly don't see Toronto really doing much more. I mean, maybe they sneak in a game, which they probably will, but I think for the most part, Washington probably finishes this thing 4-1 or something like that. Just at the end of the day, when you look at how this has gone, I think that's the best case, and if John Wall continues to play the way he's been, I think it's going to be over very quickly. Now, in the last game of the night, which was the one filled with the most talk, especially about Rajon Rondo, which I'll get to in a minute. I mean, again, 2-0, the Rockets up. Now, my two co-hosts, they like the Mavericks in this series, but that was probably the most surprised I was from their picks. I just didn't see it. I think Houston, again, I don't have Houston going to the Western Conference Finals or anything, but I still think Houston's too good not to get out of this first round matchup. Now, I give you, James Harden has not been great in the playoffs. He really has had to prove people wrong in that regard, but he's played very well so far this year, and he's kind of shedding that label as of now. But the big talk is all been about Rajon Rondo last night, and I was listening to Mike and Mike coming over here. Of course, Brian Windhorst, if you don't follow him on Twitter, if you don't hear from him, I'm sure you have if you're an NBA fan. He's just the best. His content is the greatest. His stuff, I mean, his take on things is just spot on. And again, he killed it this morning when he was talking about Rajon Rondo. And just, look, the guy, if you're surprised by what happened last night, for people who haven't heard, basically was benched for the second half. Numbskull decisions in the first half, and look, he's just not he's showed it this year with getting into that fight with Rick Carlisle. He is a diva. He always has been. He's a troublemaker. He's a guy I've never wanted any part with. And you look at what happened with Boston. To be honest, they were better when he left. And Brian Windhorst talked about, well, when he had that knee injury, he never really was the same. And one thing I didn't really think about, but when you do sit there and you kind of reflect on things, it's 100% true, which Brian Windhorst said, is he's never developed that perimeter scoring. He's never developed that shot. He's always been able to cling his hat to how hard he played defensively, being an active rebounder, being very physical, scrappy guy, and he's not like that anymore after that injury. And again, he doesn't have a great offensive game. And for people who think, oh, look, he's not going to be back with Dallas. I mean, you look at what happened last night. You look at what's happened this year with him. It's not a good relationship. And I got to be honest, I don't want any part of him on my team. If you think, and he's going to want money, if you're a team and you're going to go out there and you want this guy hanging around your locker room, good luck to you. And somebody will. Somebody always does, like Lance Stevenson with Charlotte. Somebody's always going to pull the trigger. Someone's always going to think he'll work. I'll make him work. Not going to happen. Rondo is a head case. He is a diva. He's a troublemaker. Those are the three words. If you had to describe him, those are the three best words to do it. And I want no part of that. You saw it last night. I mean, it all comes down. And look, Rick Carlisle is a great coach. I'm glad, and I think Mark Cuban, that's one thing you give him credit for, is the first time he didn't say come out and call out Rondo, but he certainly stuck with his coach's decision, and that's the right thing to do because in this case, I mean, look, Rondo fought with Doc Rivers, he fought with Rick Carlisle. Those are two guys who've got NBA championship rings on their fingers. If you're not going to it's one thing when you disagree with a coach and it makes it easy for the owner when the coach hasn't done anything, but when you're arguing with coaches who've won NBA rings, who you're going to side with? I think it's pretty easy. Rondo, I've never been a fan. I don't like the attitude, and that's what you get, so much attitude with the guy. He's a diva. Don't want any part of him. He's let his team down, and you look at his mentality, you look at his facial expressions, his body language is just awful, and it just screams, I mean, just being bad. I mean, his points last night, of course, were nothing to write home. Nothing at all, really, from him. And Dallas is in big trouble. Chandler Parsons also didn't play last night, which certainly didn't help. And when you have Rondo, who is such an important role for this team, well, Dallas is just in big trouble. And look, they're not going to come back in this series. It's just not going to happen. Houston is just too good defensively right now. I think Dwight Howard, he's been very good in this series. Now, there's not much they can do. But I think tonight we've got some more interesting games coming up. Obviously, the Clippers and the Spurs, everybody kind of talking about that one in that regard because I think finally we're going to get a series that'll be tied up 1-1. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if the Clippers won again because they really did put on an impressive performance in the first game. Chris Paul was fantastic. Blake Griffin was excellent. And San Antonio kind of felt them out a little bit. Now, again, this is kind of what the Spurs do. I think some people overreact. Some people don't. I think that the Spurs kind of just felt it out. Now, they do struggle with the athleticism of the front line of the Spurs, which Tim Legler really said, and that's a really good point there. I mean, it's the athleticism of DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin. San Antonio struggles with that. Now, he seemed to think, too, that Chris Paul and Tony Parker Chris Paul was getting the best of him in that battle, and he did in Game 1, but I don't really worry as much about Tony Parker. I think he's, again, kind of feeling you out. That's what they kind of do. I think they'll be okay. I do think they bounce back tonight, though. But it'll be interesting to see because if LA takes a 2-0 lead in this series, well, I think the Spurs are in a little bit of trouble because, again, that athleticism, the speed, and the pace that the Clippers play at, if they get that lead, I think the Spurs are in big, big trouble. So we will certainly see if they bounce back tonight. And tonight, obviously, again, trail Houston and Memphis. Memphis, I have winning this series. I do think Portland makes it interesting. They might win a game or two. I don't know if they win tonight, but Houston, again, I said it the other day. I think Memphis is such a difficult team. Maybe one of the hardest teams to have to play in a 7-game series because they physically overwhelm you and just wear you down. They're so difficult to play in this series because even if you get out of it, a series against Memphis, you're certainly going to be very tired. You're going to be worn down, and it's really going to affect you in that next series. By the time you recover, it might be too late. Memphis is a very difficult one to play. And then obviously Atlanta and Brooklyn, kind of Atlanta running a high off of their coach winning the Coach of the Year, which was very well deserved. Again, my thoughts on it have just been he's the Bruce Arians of the NBA. The guy massively overachieves with the talent on that roster. Now, people are going to give me, well, they have great players. I mean, look, they have good players. Paul Millsap is a good player. Jeff Teague is a good player. Al Horford is a good player. They don't have superstars in any regard. They are the San Antonio Spurs without the star element. I mean, that's basically what they are. They play great defense. They move the ball well. They do all the fundamental things right. They play smart. They're well coached. They do a lot of things that you like about, but the NBA playoffs at the end of the day is all about superstars. Like we've been seeing in these games, when these games have been very close going into the fourth quarter, and in the last 8 minutes of the game, you give the balls to your best players and you tell them to go make plays, and that's what's been happening. It happened with LeBron James. It happened with Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson. That's just the way that the NBA playoffs work, and it's what we've been seeing to this point. But I do think Atlanta gets by Brooklyn very easily in this series. I don't think it's very competitive, but it'll be be fun to watch again tonight. It's been fun. You don't get too much sleep during this time of the year, but it's totally worth it because the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs, it's just a lot of fun having all these games switching back and forth late at night. There's always something good to watch, and we will certainly be back giving you lots of good things to watch. So stay with us, and we will be right back.